Hello, my friends. My name is Darren Gerdes, and here are three big stories for today. So I'm going to talk about a few things, and including Kursk. And then after that, I'll show you some of like four really awesome memes and one really amazing comment at the very end. So stay with me the whole time. We're going to start here because 25 years ago today, Boris Yeltsin made a huge mistake. He appointed former KGB spy Vladimir Putin as prime minister. Now let's go back to an article from the Moscow Times. At that date, this is August 10th, 1999. Vladimir Putin is a former KGB spy, a shrewd bureaucratic operator, and a completely untested public politician. He also has a reputation of being a man who's completely loyal to his immediate boss. That's what got him into power, because he was totally loyal to Yeltsin. So it's actually Yeltsin who's largely responsible for the mess that we're in today. I don't think he would have predicted it, but that's how he got there. Yeltsin said Putin was the man who would unite the country. Wow, how about that? He will be able to unite those who renew Russia's greatness in the 21st century, Yeltsin said. A little bit further down, Putin's career took a meteoric rise. Following Yeltsin's re-election, Putin was brought into Moscow to work in the Kremlin. In March 1997, he was named chairman of the Kremlin's General Control Officer. Get this, listen to this, a watchdog body charged with fighting corruption and overseeing the implementation of presidential decrees. So Putin's going to fight corruption. That's like the fox guarding the henhouse. In that job, Putin took a tough line with Russia's regional governors who were straying too far from the Kremlin line. But he could stray as far as he wants, it's just that they can't. Last July, Yeltsin appointed Putin FSB director. Putin is widely viewed as liberal. Like at the time in 1999, there was hope. As the State Duma was debating Yeltsin's impeachment, Putin's FSB sent an analytical document to both houses of parliament claiming that the articles of impeachment contained, quote, significant mistakes of a legal nature, unquote. And it was widely viewed as a threat to the lawmakers that they should they try to remove Yeltsin. Okay, that's what we saw back then. So Yeltsin is largely responsible for the rise of Putin, and okay, that's where we are. Yesterday, I talked about this. A Russian Z blogger, we were attacked with the CSTO, that's the Collective Security Treaty Organization, which includes Belarus and Kazakhstan and Russia and Tajikistan, Armenia. Will they say anything? Okay, well, let's first look at this. This is the former Soviet Union, including the Baltic states over here and Ukraine down here. And okay, and the CSTO is only in green. The other member states are just observers or decided not to join or what have you. Okay, no, they're not going to do anything. Given that Collective Security Treaty Organization's members are free to attack each other, as was the case with Azerbaijan and Armenia, the word allies in Russia's vocabulary is fluid at best. No, there's no real protection there. Okay, but Belarus is really chummy with Russia, so we see this. Belarus says it's deploying Iskander missile systems to the border with Ukraine. Self-proclaimed president of Belarus. Now, he says it like that because while he did win an election, it was a fraudulent election, just like the election in Russia was. Alexander Lukashenko said yesterday that Ukraine allegedly violated the country's airspace. Ukraine violated Belarusian airspace? Yesterday at 6:10 p.m., the forces of the Air Force and Air Defense Forces of Belarus were put on high alert. We call it readiness number 1, he said. Okay, so I don't think anything will come of it, but they're trying to divert troops away from where they are in Russia. Weapons from Belarus to the border is an attempt to assist Putin and divert the attention of the Ukrainian command to that direction, according to the head of the Center for Countering Disinformation. And here Kyiv accuses Belarus of aiding Putin by diverting Ukrainian forces, while an incursion into Russia's Kursk Oblast since 6 August have sparked combat and panic. Okay. So what needs to happen here is something full-throated response by Western allies, the U.S., somebody, just a public pronouncement. If Belarus does anything, if they get involved in any way, all gloves are off or something like that, the U.S. will allow Ukraine to use weapons anywhere in Russia or Belarus. Some kind of significant threat. People respond to incentives. Incentives matter. This is the first thing you learn in economics. And without that, they're just going to continue to be bad actors. And it's, I believe, a bluff, but there needs to be some kind of clear response. Okay, this is the next big story. The U.S. needs to learn a great deal from what Ukraine has done, according to General David Petraeus. If you want to listen to solid voices about what's going on in Ukraine, you listen to folks like Petraeus or Ben Hodges, and they'll be very clear about it. Not so much Colonel McGregor. Okay, General David Petraeus, he's the U.S. Army, former commander of the surge in Iraq, the U.S. Central Command, coalition forces in Afghanistan, former director of the CIA. So the Kyiv Post asks if the U.S. aid is too little too late. The U.S. has been providing robust aid to Ukraine, especially the passage of the $61 billion military aid package in April, yet others have pointed out that Washington has been consistently slow in making its decisions to help. The Biden administration has been accused of obliging the Ukrainians to fight with one hand tied behind their back, of wanting Ukrainians not to win, but to not lose. And those are different things. Petraeus' response: the U.S. has, of course, provided more overall assistance than just about all other contributing countries put together. Without U.S. weapon systems, munitions, vehicles, logistics, coordination, Ukraine's situation would be vastly more challenging. That said, you are correct to note that, and I have repeatedly questioned why, key decisions, the provisions of M1 tanks, ATACMS, F-16 aircraft, cluster munitions, were delayed when it appeared inevitable that they would be approved. It's because we self-deterred. That's what's going on there. The concern apparently was Russian escalation in some fashion, including potential use of tactical nuclear weapons, if the U.S. provided certain weapon systems. But once again, those concerns proved unfounded. But Putin won strategic deterrence by deterring the United States for periods of time for all of those steps. And that's unfortunate because we're almost to day 900 at this point. You have met with the commander of the armed forces of Ukraine, General Syrskyi, since he took over from General Zaluzhny. Have you noticed any specific tactical changes being implemented by Syrskyi? What advice would you give him? And he said this: in many respects, the Ukrainian approach on use of technology, especially air and maritime drones with ground robotic systems coming online as well, is sheer genius. I would echo that. The Ukrainians have just been amazing. The fact that Ukraine, without any meaningful naval vessels, could sink over 1/3 of Russia's Black Sea fleet and force it to withdraw from Sevastopol and the Western Black Sea is extraordinary tribute to the Ukrainian tech sector and those in uniform employing the unmanned air and maritime systems that have enabled those operations. They should rightly be praised for that. The determination of Ukraine to produce 1 million aerial drones in 12 months is equally extraordinary and has done much to offset the substantially greater number of Russian soldiers than Ukrainians on the front lines. General Syrskyi and the Ministry of Defense have orchestrated all of this very impressively, sending machines rather than men wherever feasible. Finally, given the recent offset into the Kursk Oblast of Russia, it is clear that Ukraine is not solely on the defensive anymore, and we're going to talk about that in just a moment. With a limited number of F-16s in Ukraine, how do you see the presence affecting the front lines? And Petraeus said it's long overdue. He also said it's going to be modest at the outset, but it's going to push the Russians back to be more cautious. They're going to have to be more cautious than they ever were before. And he said, my expectation is that the early focus of Ukrainian F-16s will be on what are termed defensive counter-air missions, seeking to push Russian aircraft back even further from the front lines, and in some cases, pushing them out of the ability of range at some point Ukrainian locations that have been previously vulnerable to the very destructive glide bomb attacks. So their presence will push them back so they can't attack with glide bombs with impunity as they had been before. Indeed, the U.S. and other countries, this is the headline, need to learn a great deal from what Ukraine has done and likely will do. I'm sure this will be studied at West Point and other military academies in the future. Much of Ukraine's surprising success would have been extremely difficult, if not impossible, without the help of U.S. intelligence assistance. Americans are worried that the SBU might be infiltrated by Russia, as well as annoyed by Ukraine's withholding of information from Washington and general lack of transparency. But Petraeus said basically their relationship is awesome. The relationship between our respective multiple intelligence services are absolutely superb, regardless of whatever political friction might manifest itself from time to time. Beyond that, I think the U.S. administration has been absolutely right from the outset to assert that it will engage in nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine. That's the right policy. Okay, they end with this. Which of the two candidates for president, Donald Trump or Kamala Harris, in your opinion, is more likely to help Ukraine win? And as a good military man, he said, I'm afraid I don't engage in domestic politics in the U.S., so I will leave this to others, while noting that there is a very strong, now this was important, very strong bipartisan support in the U.S. Congress for continued assistance to Ukraine. That is there. So that's a positive thing. Okay, so that's where we are with Petraeus's assessment. I think it was very good, worth hearing, helps us understand and frame what's going on. Okay, now let's turn our attention to Kursk, the big story here. Scared coward. Putin's fear to mobilize is justified, as Russian mobilization would ultimately work in Ukraine's favor in the long run. It would create unrest. It would make the country so disrupted. It would chase people out. More people, if he declared mobilization, more people would flee the country, and that would ultimately hurt it. So he's trying to bribe volunteers, and that's not working as quickly as he needs to. This is what it looks like, the map right now. Ukrainian forces have consolidated gains north of Sutsa and have taken several towns up to the town of this I can't pronounce. Russian drone footage only now confirms it. This makes around 470 square kilometers, 185 square miles, under Ukrainian control in less than 5 days. It's absolutely stunning to see this. The map shows only very conservative Ukrainian gains. There's reason to believe that they're actually far deeper into the Kursk region. You have to give Ukrainian OPSEC credit. It flawlessly works. And their OPSEC was awesome. It really, really was. Okay. Showed this earlier, but it's still worth seeing again. And then Operator Starsky wrote this, and I thought, wow, that's a really interesting way of looking at this. Orcs can't understand, where did Ukraine find men for the Kursk attack? I don't know either, but I'm really grateful to Colonel McGregor for misinforming Russians, making them think that we have lost millions of male population, lying about women and children in the trenches. Please receive your award from the Security Service of Ukraine at 33 Volodymyr Street, Kyiv, anytime. Okay, here are 4 awesome memes. There's a lot of talk about how Zelensky's out buying up mansions and yachts and things along these lines in the Russian state media in order to undermine Zelensky. Well, sources have leaked, this is from a NAFO fella, sources have leaked information suggesting that President Zelensky is in the process of acquiring this mansion in Kursk Oblast using U.S.-approved aid. You get the joke, I'm sure. Kadyrov soldiers running to help Russian conscripts in Kursk region. And then the invasion is going according to plan. Our invasion, right? And then finally there's this. Putin has learned a new anthem. Okay, so we're going to leave it at that. Thank you, my friends, for the likes and the shares and the subscribes. And thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.